Advertise to yourself. I often start the day by drawing your circles on a blank piece of paper. The circles represent my day today, my month, my year, and my life. Inside each circle, I write down what I want. It can be a dollar figure, it can be anything. And the goals can change from day to day. It doesn't matter. There is no way to get this process wrong. But by writing the goals down, I'm like an airline pilot who is consulting his or her map prior to takeoff. I am orienting my mind to what I am up to in life. I am reminding myself of what I really want. We wouldn't think before an airline flight of poking our heads into the cabin and saying to the pilot, "Just take me anywhere." Yet, that's how we live our days when we don't check the map. Sometimes, in my seminars on motivation, people observe that they don't have time for goal setting. But the 4-circle system I described takes only 4 minutes. Once during a workshop on goal setting, I asked if anyone in the audience had any interesting experiences with visualization. We had been discussing sports psychologist Rob Gilbart's observation that losers visualize the penalties of failure and winners visualize the rewards of success. A young couple shared a story about how they had wanted for years to buy their own home but never got the money together to do it. Then one day, after reading about the practice of treasure mapping, posting pictures of what you want in life somewhere in your office or home, they decided to put a picture on their refrigerator of a new house, the kind they dreamed of owning. In less than 9 months, we had made the down payment and moved in, said the amazed husband. His wife added, alongside the photo of the house, we eventually put a little thermometer that we filled in as our savings toward our down payment grew. I have heard many similar stories about how treasure mapping has worked for people. I have also read books and attended seminars that explain why. Most of them discuss what happens to the subconscious mind when you send it a picture of something you want, because the subconscious mind only communicates with vividly imagined or real pictures. It will not seek to bring into your life anything you can't picture. Without advertising our goals to ourselves, we can lose sight of them altogether. It is possible to go an entire week or 2 or 3 without thinking about our main goals in life. We get caught up in reacting and responding to people and circumstances, and we simply forget to think about our own purpose. I have an example of how this practice worked in my life. 3 years ago, I was interested in giving more seminars on the subject of fundraising. I had co-authored a book called Relationships, Revolutionary Fundraising with University of Arizona Development Director Michael Bassoff. We had done some successful seminars on the subject. I wanted to do more, so on the wall of my bedroom, I put up a white poster board, and on that board, I put up a lot of pictures and index cards with my goals on them. I wanted to have all those goals in front of me when I woke up each morning, even though I only spent a minute or two looking at the board each day. One of the index cards I had pinned to my goal board simply contained the bold markered letters ASU. It was almost lost among the hotspots of photos and goals I had covered the board with. And I'm certain I only barely noticed it each morning as I got up. I put it up there because I thought it would be great if I could give seminars to Arizona State University, especially now that I was living in the Phoenix area. I really thought nothing more of it. One day, at the offices of the corporate training company where I worked, I was asked to shake the hand of a new employee, Jerry. I asked Jerry to come in and sit down. We talked in my office for a few minutes about his joining the company. I asked him about his family and he casually mentioned that his parents were living in town and that his mother worked at ASU. Normally, that would have meant nothing. ASU is a very well-known and oft mentioned presence in the Phoenix area, but something went off in my mind when he shared that, and I know in hindsight that something was my daily view of my goal board. My ears perked up when he said ASU, and I asked him, "What does your mother do at ASU?" She is the chief administrative assistant to the development director at the ASU Foundation. He said, "They are in charge of all the fundraising at the university." I really brightened at that point, and I told Jerry about my past work in fundraising at the University of Arizona in Tucson, and how I would always wanted to do seminar work at ASU. He said he would be delighted to introduce me to his mother and to the development director himself. Within a month, ASU fundraisers were attending my seminars in relationship, and I had realized one of the goals on my board. I honestly believe that if I had not had a goal board up in my bedroom, Jerry's mention of ASU would have gone right past me. And this illustrates something important. We need to advertise our own goals to ourselves. Otherwise, our psychic energy is spread too thin across the spectrum of things that aren't that important to us. Think outside the box. Once I attended a new business proposal presentation by Rob Coither, in which he had his prospective customers all play a little 9-dot game that illustrated to them that the solutions to puzzles are often simple to see if we think in unconventional ways. As people laughed and tore off their puzzles in frustration when Coither showed them the solution, he stood up to make his final point. We restrict our thinking for no good reason, said Coither. We do things simply because that's the way we always did them. I want you to know that our commitment in serving your company is to always look outside the box for the most innovative solutions possible to our problems. We'll never do something just because that's the way we have always done it. Too many business leaders pitching a lucrative account. This kind of puzzle-solving exercise would simply be considered a clever presentation. But to Bob Coither, it was a symbolic expression of his whole life in business. Once, on a Xerox-sponsored trip in Cancun, Mexico, Bob and Mike spent the day out in treacherous waters on a fishing boat. After coming ashore, they retired to Carlos O'Brien's restaurant for tequila and beer and a period of reflection on their lives in selves thus far. We knew that as well as we had done, we would never own boats like the one we were just in if we remained at Xerox, shared Bob. We talked about possibilities in the bar, and it wasn't long before we noticed some black t shirts on the wall with the word infinity on them. Then, for more than 2 hours, Mike and I discussed just what the word infinity meant. Out of that discussion, a dream was born, a dream that took shape in the form of infinity communications. Bob Coither and his brother believed that there was one vital area in which Xerox was underperforming, and that was customer service. What if they asked a company's commitment to the customer was infinite, not boxed in, but unlimited in its possibilities for creative service? With that concept as motivation, the two brothers formed Infincom, shared for Infinity Communications. In the state of Arizona, and within 10 years, they grew from 6 employees and no customers into a 50 million business with more than 500 employees. And for the past 3 years straight, the Arizona Business Gazette has ranked Inficom the number one office equipment company in Arizona, ahead of Xerox. All of us tend to look at our challenges from inside a box. We take what we have done in the past and put it in front of our eyes and then try to envision what we call the future. But that restricts our future. With that restricted view, the best the future can be is a new and better past. Great motivational energy occurs when we get out of the box and assume that the possibilities for creative ideas are infinite. To realize the best possible future for yourself, don't look at it through a box containing your own past. Keep thinking, keep thinking. Motivation comes from thought. Every act we take is preceded by a thought that inspires that act. And when we quit thinking, we lose the motivation to act. We eventually slip into pessimism, and the pessimism leads to even less thinking. And so it goes. A downward spiral of negativity and passivity feeding on itself like cancer. I like to use this example in my seminars to illustrate the power of continuing to think. Let's say a pessimist has made up his mind to clean his garage on a Saturday morning. He wakes up and walks out to the garage and opens the door, and it's shocked to see just how much of a mess it is. Forget this, the pessimist says with disgust. No one could clean this garage in one day. And at that point, the pessimist slams the garage door shut and goes back inside to do something else. Pessimists are all or nothing thinkers. They think in catastrophic absolutes. They are either going to do something perfectly or not at all. Now, let's look at how the optimist would face the same problem. He wakes up on the same morning and goes to the same garage and sees the same mesh and even utters the same first words to himself. Forget this. No one could clean this garage in one day. But this is where the key difference between an optimist and pessimist shows itself. Instead of going back into the house, the optimist keeps thinking, okay, so I can't clean the whole garage, he said. What could I do that would make a difference? He looks for a while and thinks over. Finally, it occurs to him that he could break the garage down into 4 sections and do just one section today. For sure, I'll do one today, he says, and even if I only do one section each Saturday, I'll have the whole garage in great shape before the month is over. A month later, you see a pessimist with a filthy garage and an optimist with a clean garage. There was a woman in one of my seminars in Las Vegas who told me that this one concept, the optimist habit of looking for partial solutions, had made an interesting difference in her life. I used to come home from work and look at my kitchen and just throw up my hands and curse at it and did nothing at all, she told me. I would think the exact same things as the pessimist in your garage story. Then I decided to just pick a small part of the kitchen and do that, and the area only. It might be a shared encounter or just the sink. By doing just one small part each night, I never resent the work. It's never overwhelming, and my kitchen always looks decent. Pessimists like to set their problems aside. They think so negatively about doing the whole thing perfectly that they end up doing nothing at all. The optimist always does a little something. She or he always takes an action and always feels like progress is being made. Because pessimists have a habit of thinking it's hopeless or nothing can be done, but they quite thinking too soon. An optimist may have the same initial negative feelings about a project, but he or she keeps thinking until smaller possibilities open up. This is why Alan Loy McGuinness, in his inspiring book, The Power of Optimism, refers to optimists as tough-minded. The pessimist, as far as the use of the human mind goes, is a quitter. Recent studies show, says McGuinness, that optimists excel in school, have better health, make more money, establish long and happy marriages, stay connected to their children, and perhaps even live longer. To witness one of the most profound illustrations of the practical effectiveness of optimism in American history, you will want to rent the movie Apollo 13. Although the job of bringing those astronauts back from the far side of the moon looked daunting and overwhelming, the job was accomplished one small task at a time. The people at Mission Control in Houston who saved the astronauts' lives did so because even in that face of impossible technological breakdowns, they kept on thinking. They never gave up. They looked for partial solutions, and they declared that they would string these partial solutions together one at a time until they brought the main home safely. While the astronauts' lives were still in doubt, there was one glaring pessimist in Houston ground control who made the comment that he feared that Apollo 13 might become the worst space disaster in American history. The ground commander in Houston turned to him and said with optimism and anger, "On the contrary, sir, I see Apollo 13 as being our finest hour." And he turned out to be right, which illustrates the life or death effectiveness of optimistic thinking. Whenever you feel pessimistic or overwhelmed, remember to keep thinking. The more you think about a situation, the more you will see small opportunities for action. And the more small actions you take, the more optimistic energy you will receive. An optimist keeps thinking and self-motivates. A pessimist quits thinking and then just quits. In the Broadway musical South Pacific, the heroine sings apologetically about being a cock-eyed optimist. She admits she's immature and incurably green. This was an early version of a blunt joke. She confesses as the giddy song soars melodically that she's stuck like a dope on a thing called hope and I can't get it out of my heart, not this heart. That's how our society has viewed optimists. They are dopes. Society thinks optimistic thinking is something that comes from the heart, not the head. Pessimists, on the other hand, are realistic. In fact, pessimists will never tell you they are pessimists. In their own minds, they are realists. And when they run into habitual optimists, they sneer at them for always blue skying everything and not facing grim reality. Pessimists continually use their imaginations to visualize worst-case scenarios and then concluding that those scenarios are lost causes. They take no action. That's why pessimism always leads to passivity. But even lying on his couch, bloated with junk food and foggy from too much television, the pessimist knows somewhere in his heart that his what's the use attitude is not effective. He is living a life that is reflected in what Nietzsche once said, "Everything in the world displeased me, but what displeased me most was my displeasure with everything." Optimists have chosen to make a different use of the human imagination. They agree with Colin Wilson's point of view that imagination should be used not to escape from reality but to create it. Put on a good debate. Negative thinking is something we all do. The difference between the person who is primarily optimistic and the person who is primarily pessimistic is that the optimist learns to become a good debater. Once you become thoroughly aware of the effectiveness of optimism in your life, you can learn to debate your pessimistic thoughts. The most thorough and useful study I've ever seen on how to do this is contained in Dr. Martin Seligman's classical work, Learned Optimism. The studies done by Seligman demonstrate two very profound revelations. 1. Optimism is more effective than pessimism. 2. Optimism can be learned. Seligman based his finding on years of statistical research. He studied professional and amateur athletes, insurance, salespeople, and even politicians running for office. His scientific studies prove that optimists dramatically outperform pessimists. So what Norman Vincent Peale had been saying for years in his books on the power of positive thinking was finally proven to be scientifically true. Peale had based his books on testimonials and supportive biblical passages. The problem with that was that the people he needed to reach the most, skeptics and pessimists, were precisely the kinds of people who would not be anxious to take anything on faith. But once you have digested the remarkable writings of Seligman, you can go back and read Pierre with a new sense of excitement. If you don't accept his religious references, it doesn't matter. The personal testimonials are stimulating enough to give his writing great power. Although his most famous book is The Power of Positive Thinking, I have derived much more motivation from Stay Alive All Your Life and the amazing results of positive thinking. If you are now skeptical about your power to debate your own pessimistic thoughts, keep in mind that most of us are already great debaters. If somebody comes in and takes one side of an argument, we can usually take the other side and make a case, no matter which side the first person took. Debate teams have to learn to do this. Team members never know until the last second which side of the argument they will be debating. So they learn to be prepared to passionately argue either side. If you catch yourself brooding, worrying, and thinking pessimistically about an issue, the first step is to recognize your thoughts as being pessimistic. Not wrong or untrue, just pessimistic. And if you are going to get the most out of your biocomputer, the brain, you must acknowledge that pessimistic thoughts are less effective. Once you have accepted the pessimistic nature of your thinking, you are ready to take the next step. The first step is crucial though, as Nathaniel Branden teaches. You can't leave a place you have never been. The second step is to build a case for the optimistic view. Start to argue against your first line of reasoning. Pretend you are an attorney whose job is to prove the pessimist in you wrong. Start off and building your case for what's possible. You will surprise yourself. Optimism is by nature expansive. It opens door after door to what's the possible. Pessimism is just the opposite. It is a constrictive. It shuts the door and possibility. If you really want to open up your life and motivate yourself to succeed, become an optimistic thinker. Make travel work for you. One evening, many years ago, my then 14-year-old daughter, Stephanie, went for a walk with a friend, promising me she would be back home before 10 p.m. I didn't pay much attention to the clock until 10 o'clock. News ended and I realized that she hadn't come home yet. I started to get nervous and irritated. I began pacing the house, wondering what to do. At 11:30, I got in my car and started cruising the neighborhood looking for her. My thoughts were understandably anxious, part fear and part anger. Finally, at 11:45, I drove back past my own house and saw her shouting in the window. She was home and safe, but I kept driving. I realized that I was thinking completely pessimistically about the entire incident, and I needed to keep thinking before I talked to her. As I drove along, I observed all the pessimism I was allowing in. She doesn't respect me. She can't keep a promise. My rules and requests mean nothing. This is the tip of the iceberg. I'm going to have problems with her for the next 4 years at least. Who knows where she went and what she was doing? Were drugs involved? Sex? Crime? I'm losing sleep over this. This is running my peace of mind and my life, etc. By recognizing how pessimistic my thoughts were, By recognizing how pessimistic my thoughts were, I was able to let the thoughts play completely out before taking a deep breath and telling myself, okay, that's one side of the argument. Now it's time to explore the other side. One of my favorite tricks for flipping my mind over to the optimistic side is to ask myself the question, how can I use this? How could I use this incident to improve my relationship with my daughter? How could I make my rules and requests more meaningful to us both? I began to build my case for optimism. I realized that great relationships are built by incidents like this. They are not built by theoretical conversations, but by difficult experiences and what we learn and gain from them. So I decided to drive a little while longer and let her wait inside. I was sure that by now her sister had told her that I was out looking for her, so she was now the one pacing and anxious. Let her sweat a little. I thought, while I continue to think things through, I continue to reflect upon my past relationship with Stephanie. One of the great aspects of it was Stephanie's honesty. She had always radiated a quiet and confident kind of serenity about life, and found it easy to be honest with her own feelings and honest with other people. Whenever there had been incidents with other children, teachers, or other parents involved in some misunderstanding, I could always count on Stephanie to tell me the truth. Asking her about what happened always saved me a lot of time. As I drove the dark neighborhood, I also ran through my happiest memories of Stephanie as a little girl, how much I loved her and how proud I was of her when I went to her concerts or talked to her teachers. I recalled the time in grade school when I embarrassed her by asking her principal if he would consider renaming the school after her. She had just won an academic award of some kind, and I was intoxicated with pride. Finally, my mind was completely won over the optimistic side. How can I use this? Gave me the idea that this incident could be made into something bigger than it seemed. A new commitment to each other to keep agreements and trust each other. When I finally got home, I could see that she was scared. She tried to blame the incident on her not having a voice. She wanted me to appreciate that. Somehow, she was a victim of the whole incident. I listened patiently. And I then told her I thought it was a much bigger deal than that. I talked about my relationship with her and how I had cherished her truthfulness throughout her childhood. I told her that I thought we might have lost all of that tonight, that we might have to figure a way to start over. It's not that big deal. She protested, but I told her that I thought it was a very big deal because it was all about our relationship and whether we were going to keep agreements with each other. I told Stephanie I wanted her to be as happy as she could possibly be. And the only way I could really help that happen would be if I kept agreements with each other. I told her how scared I was, how angry I was, how her staying out had ruled out a good night's sleeps for me. I asked her to try to understand. I talked about our life together when she was a little girl. I reminded her how extraordinarily truthful she was. I mentioned a few incidents when she got in trouble, but how I had gone right to her for the truth and always got it. We talked for a long time that night, And she finally saw that coming home when she says she's coming home, indeed doing what she says she's going to do, is a really big deal. It's everything. Since that incident and conversation, Stephanie has been extremely sensitive to keeping her word. If she goes out and promises to be back at a certain time, she takes along a watch or makes certain someone she's with has won. The incident that night is something neither of us will forget because it got us clear on the idea of trust and agreements. You could even say that it was a good thing. We have heard of so many incidents where bad events in a retrospect were strokes of great fortune. A person who broke her leg skiing met a doctor in the hospital, fell in love, married him, and had a happy relationship for life. Because most of us have experienced a number of these incidents, we are aware of the dynamic. What seems bad, like a broken leg, turns out unexpectedly great. We begin to see the truth that every problem carries a gift inside it. By choosing to make use of seemingly bad events, you can access that gift much sooner. By asking yourself, how can I use this? Or what might be good about this? You can turn your life around on a dime. Storm your own brain. The term brainstorming is now very well known in American business life. I first learned it many years ago when I worked as a copywriter in an ad agency. Whenever we would get a new account, our agency's president would get us all together to brainstorm for creative ideas for the client. The main rules of the brainstorming session are there are no stupid ideas. The more unreasonable, the better. And two, everyone must play. I have sometimes facilitated brainstorming sessions with business managers. We go around the table and each person puts out an idea and the facilitator writes it on the flip pad. We go around and around until all the reasonable ideas are exhausted and the unreasonable ideas start to flow. It is usually among the unreasonable ideas that something great is discovered. Brainstorming works so well because the unusual restraints against stupidity are lifted. It's okay to be unreasonable and far out. What most people in business don't realize is that this powerful technique can be used by an individual alone with himself or herself. I first discovered this while driving in my car a number of years ago, listening to a motivational tape by Al Nightingale. He talked about a system he had learned that worked wonders. On the top of a piece of paper, you put a problem you want solved or goal you want reached. You then put numbers 1 through 20 on the paper and begin your brainstorming session. The rules are the same as with a group session. You have to list 20 ideas and they don't have to be well thought out or even reasonable. Give yourself permission to flow. Your only objective is to have 20 ideas scrawled down within a certain short amount of time. If you do this for a week, you will end up with 100 ideas. Are all of them usable? Of course not, but who cares? When you begin the process, you probably didn't have any usable ideas. I have used this system myself over and over with really great results. It works so well because it relaxes the normal tensions against creative, outrageous thinking. It invites the right side of your brain to play along. Recently, a friend called for some advice about his career. He was in show business and had developed his act to the point where he was one of the top performers in the nation. His problems, his problem was marketing and self-promotion. That parts of his career was lagging behind his talent. What if I told you that there is someone who can give you 100 specific marketing ideas tailored to your precise career and audience? I asked him. He was very interested. You, yourself, are that person, I said. I then told him about the list of 20 self-storming techniques I had personally been using for a number of years. He eagerly jotted down the rules of the game and got busy playing. 2 weeks later, he called me very excited about the results. I have got some really great marketing ideas right now, more than I have ever had in the past. He said, thanks. Self-mentoring is the best mentoring you can get because your mentor knows you so well. And although it's often beneficial to get a specific outside personal coaching, the best coaching teaches us to look within. A great mentor once said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." Keep changing your voice. There have been times when I have been told that I'm lucky to have a good speaking voice, and some people are impressed that I rarely use a microphone in my seminars, even with the hundreds of people in the audience. People will conclude that I have been blessed with a powerful set of vocal cords, but it is not true. As I related in an earlier chapter, my voice used to be no better than a feeble monotone. That is, until I got motivated to change it. There were two instances that inspired my system for developing my voice. The first was a magazine interview I read many years ago about the actor Richard Burton, who had perhaps the most mesmerizing speaking voice of all time. Listen to the Broadway recording of Camelot and hear him as King Arthur speak and sing his songs. In the interview, Burton said that his voice was how he made his living. So he made certain that each morning while showering, he sang a number of songs to keep his vocal cords strong and supple. Later, on a television talk show, actor Tony Randall told the host how he developed his trademark sing-song acting voice. "I took off opera," he said. "I found that singing opera did more my stage voice than anything else I ever tried." Those two interviews have stayed in my mind ever since, and I always carry a number of tapes and CDs in my car to sing along with. I crank them up good and loud. This is best done while driving alone and sing at the top of my lungs. I make certain that I do this every day, even when I don't feel like singing. In the words of William James, there is another benefit. We don't sing because we are happy. We are happy because we sing. Prior to a major public speech, I'll often get to my location more than an hour ahead of time and then just drive around the neighborhood singing like a madman. Sometimes I worry that my host client might drive by and spot me in my car singing along with Elvis and looking dangerously psychotic, but the benefits are worth that risk. I find that when I drive and sing like that, my breathing is better, my timing is better, and when I speak, my voice effortlessly fills the hall. You might think I don't speak for a living, so such a weird practice might not be necessary for you, but we all speak. A pleasant, relaxed, and strong speaking voice is a priceless asset to anyone whose job involves communicating with other humans. When referring to people whose speaking voices are pleasing to listen to, many people use words like melodious and well modulated. This is a good hint to tell if someone is complimenting a great speaking voice. You are not stuck with the voice you have now. Start singing, and soon you will be creating the voice you would like to have. The stronger your voice, the stronger your confidence, and the stronger your confidence, the easier it is to motivate yourself. Embrace the new frontier. Fortunately for all of us, a new frontier is upon us because of our nation and world has entered the information age. The old patterns for living are gone. An article by business writer John Huey appeared in the June 27, 1994 edition of Fortune. In it, Huey observed, let's say you are going to a party. So you pull out some pocket chains and buy a little greeting card that plays happy birthday. When it's opened, after the party, someone casually tosses the card into the trash, throwing away more computer power than existed in the entire world before 1950. In the old paradigm, first in the industrial age, we human beings became less and less useful and adventurous. We found lifelong employment in guaranteed jobs and did our jobs the same way until retirement. Then once we reached retirement age, we became thoroughly useless to society and lived lives dependent on the government, our relatives, or our own savings that we accumulated in our useful years. Now, with the technological explosion and entry into the information age, employers are no longer as interested in our job histories as they used to be. They are now more interested in our current capabilities. One of the romantic appeals of the early Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett frontier days in our nation was the usefulness of individuals. If you were living out on the frontier, farming, cooking, and hunting, and you turned 65, it would never occur to anyone to ask you to retire. You have finally come back to those days of honoring usefulness over age and status. For example, if many company is trying to enter the Chinese market to sell its software and you at age 70 can speak fluent Chinese, know all about software and have energy and a zest for success, how can I afford to ignore you? Bill Gates of Microsoft has said, our company has only one asset, human imagination. If you took all of Microsoft's buildings, real estate, office hardware, physical assets, anything you can toss away from the company, where would it be? Almost exactly where it is now. Because in today's world, a company's value is in its thinking, not in its possessions. This is great news for the individual because usefulness is back in the style. If you can cultivate your skills, keep learning new things, study computers, learn a foreign language, or become expert in a foreign culture and market, you can make yourself useful. The great basketball coach John Wooden recommended that we live by this credo, especially apathy for the new technological frontier. Learn as if you were to live forever. Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Gone are the days when our employability depended primarily on your job history, your school ties, your connections, your family, or your seniority. Today, your employability depends on one thing: your current skills. And those skills are completely under your control. This is the new frontier, and where we once entered retirement is nervous about the wolves at our door. Today, with a commitment to lifelong growth through learning, we can be as useful to the world community as we are motivated to be. The more we learn about the future, the more motivated we become to be a valuable part of it.